And then we might want to check. Now we have to see what genes are close to this cluster that are not already in that cluster. So for G2, we check G2 against G1, G5, which is 36, and 45, which would be 112 divided by 3. Yeah, the 3 carry the 2. So it's about 30, it's going to be 37 point something, which is under 38. So let me just double check that. 31 plus 36 plus 45. 37.33. So yeah, that's just below the threshold. So G2 could get added to that. And then let's check G3. So G3 would be 58 distant from G1, 11 distance from G5, and 78 from G6. I can tell by looking at that when I average those, it's going to be greater than 38, so I don't have to calculate it. And then G4, it's going to be 27 plus 88 plus 96, which I can tell by looking at that is going to be greater than the threshold, so I don't even have to do the math. And then the ones that I have left are the ones that are inside of the cluster. So you could check to see if they are distant from the cluster. You don't have to check if they're close because we're seeing if we need to remove them from the cluster. So is G1 at all distant from G5, G6? We know that's no. It's G5 distant from because I said no because it's 12 and 10, and I know that average is going to be less than our threshold. G5, is G5 distant from G1, G6? We already did that math. 55 divided by 2. Ooh, almost. No, 27 something. Yeah, that's fine. And then G6 against G1 and G5, that's also within our threshold. So we have no genes that are distant from our cluster, that are in the cluster. So we don't have to remove any genes. Now, so we added G2 to this cluster. So are there any genes that are close now to this cluster? Well, we only have 3 genes that aren't in it, right? G3, but we only have 2 genes that aren't in it. So let's go to those genes. G3 against, it's 50 against G1 is 58, G2 83, 11, and 78. Okay, so I can tell by looking at those I'm pretty sure that's too big. I don't think that 11, no, that's an 11, it's not going to be enough to bring it down. And then G4 is the other gene that's outside of our cluster. So we go ahead and check those distances. G4 is 27, 21, 88, 96. Those look like, yeah, that's going to be too high too. So those are not close, so we can't add them. And now we check to see if any of these genes are distant from, if any of these genes are actually distant from this cluster. So we can check G1 against G2, G5, G6. I can tell by looking at it that that average would be less than the threshold. G2 against G1, G5, G6. That's borderline, but I believe we already looked at that, so it should be 45. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we did that one. 31 plus. And then G5 is G1, G2, and G6. That's within our threshold. And G6 is G1, G2, and G5. 10 plus 45 plus 43 divided by 3 is 32. Yeah, so that's within our threshold. So we don't remove any genes from C. So there's no more close genes and there's no distant genes. So we go ahead and we add that cluster to our partition. So we have our first cluster to our partition, which is G1, G2, G5, G6. And we start fresh with a new cluster, and we remove those from S. And then we remove them from the distance graph, which results in just two little vertices that are not connected because they're not close enough. So that tells you something right there. But if you wanted to test it, you could say, okay, I'm going to choose a V, go randomly since they both have no edges. So V equals G3, which means that the cluster, V is not a set, V is just G3. So the cluster is G3. We check to see if there's any close that are in S. G4, so G4 and G3, 66. No, that's not close. There's no distance within C. So we go ahead and add that to our partition. Oops, that would be G3. And so we get rid of this here, we get rid of that here, we get rid of that here, and that only leaves us one more, so that would be G4. So we have our partition is three clusters. Cluster of G1, G2, G3, G2, G5, G6. And then we create our click graph, which looks like this. So this is our final clustering, and you may say in here, well, like G6 and G2 have a threshold greater than 46, so why is there a connection there? Well, the click graph, we add and remove edges to make it a click graph, so to make the cluster. But if you averaged up these distances, so from G6 to G1 is 10, G1 to G2 is 31, G1 to G5 is 12, G2 to G6 is 45, G6 to G5 is 43, G5 to G2 is 45. I'm sorry, G5 to G2 is 36. We should have a total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges. So if I were to